My 7-year-old daughter looked up at me with wide, frightened eyes and whispered, "Mummy, Daddy told me not to tell you." At first I smiled, thinking she'd broken one of my favorite mugs or spilled juice on the carpet again. I knelt beside her, tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, and gently said, "Sweetheart, you can tell me anything." She hesitated, nervously twisting the sleeve of her little jumper before looking down at the floor. Then she quietly said, "Daddy takes another lady for ice cream, and she hugs him the way you hug Daddy." My smile disappeared instantly. For a moment the whole room felt silent. I searched her face, hoping she was confused or simply imagining things. But there was no mischief in her eyes. There was only fear. She looked like a little girl who believed she had just broken a promise. In that moment I realized she hadn't come to tell me a story. She had accidentally revealed a secret my husband had desperately tried to keep hidden. My name is Sophie. I'm 33 years old, and until that afternoon, I truly believed I had a happy marriage. My husband Daniel and I had been together for almost 12 years. We lived in a quiet neighborhood just outside Manchester, where life felt ordinary in the best possible way. Daniel worked as a project manager. I worked part-time from home, and our daughter Lily was the heart of our family. We weren't wealthy, and our lives certainly weren't perfect, but I never questioned Daniel's loyalty. Looking back now, I can see the warning signs I chose to ignore. His business trips became more frequent. His phone was never out of reach. Whenever it buzzed, he'd pick it up before I even had a chance to glance at the screen. If I asked who kept messaging him so late at night, he'd smile, kiss my forehead, and say, "Just work, Soph. Nothing to worry about." I believed him every single time because that's what trust does. It convinces you to ignore the questions you should probably be asking. I had no idea that one innocent sentence from my daughter was about to uncover a truth that would change our lives forever. For the rest of the afternoon, I couldn't focus on anything. I tried answering emails, folding laundry, even making dinner, but my mind kept drifting back to Lily's words. "Daddy told me not to tell you." Children don't usually invent secrets like that. They repeat what they've heard. Still, I desperately wanted to believe there was a simple explanation. Maybe Daniel had taken a female colleague out with the team. Maybe Lily had misunderstood a friendly hug. I held on to every excuse I could think of because the alternative was too painful to accept. When Daniel came home that evening, he looked exactly as he always did. He greeted Lily with a big hug, kissed me on the cheek, and asked what was for dinner. Watching him laugh with our daughter made me question my own instincts. Could the man standing in front of me really be hiding something so devastating? For a moment, I almost decided to forget everything Lily had said. Then, while Daniel was helping Lily with her homework, his mobile phone lit up on the kitchen counter. I wasn't trying to look at it, but the screen was facing me. A message appeared for only a second before it disappeared. "She still doesn't suspect anything. Tomorrow at the usual place." Red heart, my stomach tightened. Before I could read anything else, Daniel walked quickly across the room, picked up his phone, and slipped it into his pocket. He caught me looking and forced a small smile. "Just someone from work," he said casually. It was the same answer he'd given me dozens of times before, but this time it sounded rehearsed. Too quick. Too perfect. That night, I lay awake beside him, staring at the ceiling while he slept peacefully. Around 2 in the morning, I quietly got out of bed for a glass of water. As I passed Lily's bedroom, I noticed her light was still on. She was sitting up in bed, hugging her teddy bear. When she saw me, she whispered, "Mummy, are you going to be sad?" My heart sank. I sat beside her and gently held her hand. "Why would I be sad, sweetheart?" She looked down at her blanket before quietly replying, "Daddy said if I told you about the lady, we'd stop being a family. I felt tears sting my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. In that moment, I realized this wasn't just about another woman. Daniel had asked our little girl to carry a secret she was far too young to understand. And I knew one thing for certain. Whatever he was hiding, I was going to uncover the truth. The next morning, I made myself a promise. I wasn't going to accuse Daniel without proof. If our marriage was about to fall apart, it would be because of the truth, not suspicion. So I carried on exactly as I always did. I made breakfast, smiled when he kissed me goodbye, and waved as he drove off to work. The moment his car disappeared around the corner, my smile vanished. I picked up my handbag, got into my car, and drove straight to Lily's primary school. I asked if I could have a quick word with her class teacher, Mrs. Thompson. She welcomed me into her classroom, and after a few moments of small talk, I asked the question that had been keeping me awake all night. Has anyone ever collected Lily from school besides me or Daniel? Mrs. Thompson paused, clearly surprised. Well, yes, she replied carefully. Your husband has collected her a few times with another lady. We honestly assumed she was a close relative because Lily always seemed comfortable with her. My chest tightened. I forced a polite smile, thanked her for her time, and walked back to my car. I didn't cry. I couldn't. My mind was too busy trying to understand why my daughter had been spending time with a woman I had never even met. I had barely started the engine when my phone buzzed with a notification from our joint bank account. Daniel had just used our card at a small family cafe nearly 40 minutes from his office. He should have been in a meeting. Instead, he was somewhere that made no sense. Without giving myself time to think, I entered the cafe's address into my Saturn AV and drove there. My hands tightened around the steering wheel the entire journey. When I finally arrived, I stayed inside my car across the road watching the entrance. A few minutes later, the cafe door opened. Daniel stepped outside smiling. A woman followed beside him, laughing at something he had said. Then Lily ran out after them, holding an ice cream in one hand. Daniel reached down and took her hand, while the woman gently wiped a smear of chocolate from Lily's cheek. They looked so natural together that, for a split second, they seemed like an ordinary family enjoying a sunny afternoon. My heart sank. I quickly picked up my phone and started recording. Then I watched as Daniel slipped his hand into the woman's hand, smiled at her, and led them all towards the park across the road. I knew I couldn't leave now. Whatever this was, it was far bigger than I had ever imagined. I waited until they were a safe distance ahead before following them into the park. My legs felt heavy, yet I couldn't stop. I needed to know the truth, no matter how much it hurt. I stayed behind a row of trees, careful not to let Daniel or Lily see me. The woman spread a picnic blanket beneath a large oak tree while Daniel helped Lily open her ice cream. They laughed together so naturally that, for a moment, they looked like a family who had been doing this for years. Lily happily chatted with the woman, who listened with genuine warmth, brushing a strand of hair away from her face the same way I always did. Watching another woman share those little moments with my daughter felt like someone was quietly tearing my heart apart. I pulled out my phone and began recording. Every smile, every laugh, every glance between them felt like another piece of evidence I never wanted to find. A few minutes later, Lily ran towards the playground, leaving Daniel and the woman alone on the bench. I moved a little closer, just enough to hear their voices. The woman smiled softly and said, "I hate saying goodbye every weekend." Daniel reached for her hand without hesitation. "Not for much longer," he replied. "I promise. We'll sort everything out soon." My stomach turned. Before I could process those words, he gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and kissed her. It wasn't a moment of weakness. It wasn't a mistake. It was the kiss of two people who were completely in love. My hands trembled as I kept recording, knowing this was the proof I needed. Then Lily came running back, laughing as she threw her arms around Daniel. He picked her up, smiled at the woman and said, "Next weekend we'll do something even more special." She nodded and quietly replied, "I can't wait." Hearing them make future plans together felt like the final piece of a puzzle I never wanted to solve. Tears blurred my vision, but I refused to let myself break down, not yet. I turned away before they could see me and walked back towards my car. Just as I reached the door, my phone vibrated. It was a message from Daniel. "Meeting's taking longer than expected. I'll be home late. Love you." I stared at those words for several seconds before locking my phone. He had just lied to me again, without the slightest hint of guilt. In that moment, I stopped wondering whether my marriage could be saved. The only question left was how long he had been living this double life, and I was determined to make sure he could never lie his way out of it again. I didn't confront Daniel at the park. Anger would only give him time to invent another excuse. Instead, I drove home, copied the video to my laptop, and watched it over and over again. Every frame confirmed what my heart had already accepted. The smiles weren't accidental. The touch wasn't innocent. The kiss wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a brief affair. It was a relationship that had been carefully hidden behind late meetings and business trips. The following day, while Daniel was at work, I printed still images from the video, took screenshots of the text message I'd seen on his phone, and placed everything neatly inside a plain brown envelope. I also wrote down every date I could remember when he claimed to be working late. Almost every one of them matched a payment from our joint bank account to restaurants, cafes, or hotels in Manchester. By the time I finished, I wasn't looking at a few pieces of evidence. I was looking at the timeline of 18 months of lies. I closed the envelope, placed it in the center of the dining table, and waited. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't frightened. I was ready. Daniel arrived home just after 7 carrying a takeaway bag and a bottle of wine. He smiled as though it were any other evening. "Thought we'd have a nice dinner together," he said. I smiled politely and nodded towards the dining table. "Before we eat, there's something I'd like you to see." He looked confused as he picked up the brown envelope. The moment he pulled out the first photograph, the color drained from his face. His hand started shaking. He flipped to the next page. Then the next. The screenshots of the messages. The photograph of him holding her hand. The still image from the video where he kissed her in the park. Finally, he reached the USB drive containing the full recording. The room became unbearably quiet. Daniel looked at me, opened his mouth to speak, then closed it again. "Sup? I can explain," he whispered. I calmly shook my head. "No, Daniel. Don't explain. Just tell me one thing. How long?" He stared at the floor for what felt like forever before answering in a broken voice. 18 months. My heart ached, but I refused to let him see me fall apart. "Every late meeting?" I asked. He nodded. "Every business trip?" Another silent nod. Tears rolled down his face as he admitted, "I never meant for Lily to become part of it. I never wanted to hurt either of you." I looked at him with tears in my own eyes and quietly replied, "You didn't hurt us because you fell in love with someone else. You hurt us because every single day you looked me in the eyes and chose another lie." I slowly slipped my wedding ring from my finger and placed it on top of the envelope. The soft sound of metal touching paper echoed through the silent room. Daniel reached across the table, desperate to hold my hand, but I stepped back before he could touch me. For the first time since we'd met, there was nothing left to say. Trust had already left the room long before I did. Daniel sat there in complete silence, staring at the wedding ring resting on top of the brown envelope. His shoulders were slumped, and for the first time since I'd met him, he looked like a man who had finally run out of lies. After a long silence, he slowly stood up and took a cautious step towards me. Tears filled his eyes as he whispered, "Soph, please don't give up on us. I know I've made the biggest mistake of my life, but I love you. I'll end it tonight. I'll leave my job if I have to. I'll do whatever it takes to earn your trust again." His voice cracked with every word, but something inside me had already changed. I looked at the man I had loved for 12 years and quietly said, "This isn't about one mistake, Daniel. An affair doesn't begin with a kiss. It begins with the first lie. Every time you told me you were working late. Every time you kissed me goodbye before meeting her. Every time you asked our daughter to keep your secret, you made another choice. You didn't lose me because I found out. You lost me the moment you stopped being honest." Daniel broke down in tears, but there was nothing left that could undo the past. Some apologies arrived far too late. The following morning, I packed 2 suitcases while the house remained painfully quiet. Lily came downstairs holding her favorite teddy bear and looked at me with sleepy eyes. "Mummy, are we going somewhere?" she asked softly. I smiled through the tears and knelt beside her. "Yes, sweetheart," I replied, "we're going somewhere we can start again." She didn't ask any more questions. She simply reached for my hand. As we walked towards the front door, Daniel stood in the hallway, his eyes red from crying. He looked at Lily and whispered, "I love you more than anything." Lily hugged her teddy bear tightly before quietly saying, "Bye, Daddy." Daniel tried to answer, but the words never came. He simply watched as we stepped outside and closed the front door behind us. The sound of that door closing wasn't just the end of our marriage. It was the end of the life I'd spent 12 years trying to protect. A year later, Lily and I had built a new life together in a small home filled with peace instead of secrets. It wasn't the life I had imagined, but it was real. There were still difficult days, and there were still moments when old memories found their way back into my heart. But every morning, I woke up knowing I no longer had to question where my husband was, or wonder if another lie was waiting for me. I had learned that love without honesty is only an illusion, and trust, once broken, can never return in the same way. Sometimes the people who hurt us the most also teach us the greatest lesson, that walking away isn't a sign of weakness. Sometimes it's the bravest decision you'll ever make. And as I watched Lily laughing in our little garden one sunny afternoon, I realized something that brought tears to my eyes. My daughter hadn't destroyed our family. She had unknowingly saved us from living inside a lie. If you were in my position, would you have forgiven Daniel after 18 months of lies? Or would you have walked away to protect your peace? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more emotional stories with unforgettable twists.